collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll hear from a senior lecturer at the College of Europe about the role of the European Commission.
Right now we see that the Parliament will play the role of a real Parliament that amends basically a number of positions of the Council, and therefore that has changed the role of the European Commission. The Commission has become much more a moderator between the Parliament and the Council, whereas in the past the Commission was often sparring with the European Parliament to counterbalance the Member States' weight. So now we see that that role has changed, and the Commission is actually becoming a mediator between the two chambers, if you want, of the legislative system.
And we'll hear about former residents of Famagusta who plan to return to the fenced-off area.
My intention is to work for our return, with or without a solution to the Cyprus problem. The more people that will sign up, the better it will be.
In Brussels this week, I spoke to Jo van der Kaplan, a senior lecturer at the College of Europe, about the role of the European Commission in the European Union. For the man in the street, how would you sum up what the European Commission is?
The European Commission is the executive of the European Union. That means that it will execute the decisions adopted by the European Parliament and the Member States. So in other words, the Member States and the European Parliament make decisions and the Commission will execute them, but the Commission will also actually propose a number of things, but it always comes from the Member States and the Parliament. So in that sense, the Commission is like the executive power. I wouldn't say a government, but it has a government-like role to play.
Now, a couple of years ago, the role of the European Parliament was changed somewhat, and that therefore changed the role of the Commission.
Yeah.
So can you just explain what the difference is now from what it was?
I wouldn't say that the European Parliament's role has changed somewhat. It has really tremendously changed. In other words, the European Parliament has become the co-legislator with the Member States, and that is, of course, a tremendous change because, of course, in the past, the Member States would decide and the Parliament had to accept. Right now we see that the Parliament will play the role of a real Parliament that amends basically a number of positions of the Council, and therefore that has changed the role of the European Commission. The Commission has become much more a moderator between the Parliament and the Council, whereas in the past the Commission was often sparring with the European Parliament to counterbalance the Member States' weight. So now we see that that role has changed, and the Commission is actually becoming a mediator between the two chambers, if you want, of the legislative system.
Jean-Claude Juncker has come up with his options for the future, and he's got a State of the Union address, I think, coming up in September. There's a hope that by the end of the year, the prioritised options will become clear after consultations with the Member States. How do you see the future of Europe in the next, let's talk a little short term, in the next 5 years perhaps?
Well, in the next 5 years, first of all, I think the whole agenda will be dominated by the Brexit discussions, because of course the Brexit discussions, it's the first time that this happens, and that will change, I would say, the whole nature of the European Union.
Can I just ask you, before you continue, do you think that legally speaking, whatever happens with the Brexit discussions will become, if you like, a precedent legally should any other member states want to push the same button?
Well, it depends a bit how member states will look at it. If you take a look at member states, some member states are very eager to keep good relations with and access especially to the UK markets, whereas other member states see this much more as a political process in itself. So, but in any case, I think it will serve as a precedent, and therefore, of course, I would think that the agenda for the next but I would say for the next 5 years will be dominated by this important issue.
But there's the rest of the Union to think about. So what else?
There is
in the next
the rest
5
of the
years?
Union to think about. But think back of the Treaty of Lisbon. The whole process was set actually in the year 2000, where actually in the so-called Summit of Laeken, the whole idea was to create a convention on the future of the EU, to think about what the EU should become. So there's nothing new, actually. So I see that exactly what started about 17 years ago. We are again in the same process. What does that mean? If you take a look at that process, it took actually between the Declaration of Laeken and the Treaty of Lisbon, that took 9 years. So let's say that the next 5 years will be very much about Brexit and the beginning of a discussion on what we would want in the future. So come back in 5 years, we'll discuss it.
Joe van der Kaplan, Senior Lecturer at the College of Europe in Brussels.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In recent weeks, it does seem that the people of Cyprus are beginning to get a little tired of the non-settlement of that age-old Cyprus problem. We've had young people disrupting the buffer zone last weekend. Now, there's an idea from my next guest on the programme to resettle parts of Famagusta in the occupied north. Andreas Loredos, you ran as mayor for Famagusta. You didn't get in, but you've also, for a long time, been working on the whole idea of what needs to be done for Famagusta. So maybe we should start a little bit with what's the situation there now, and then come on to this idea you have of a limited number of people going back and trying to settle back in those deserted houses.
Famagusta today is in a precarious situation because essentially youth is no longer interested in the city, which places our generation as the last generation willing and able to do something about relocating back. The fact compounded by the lack of rapprochement efforts, by beatings that we have seen along roadblocks, poisoned education that we all have to suffer. Within this framework, Famagusta has been left for a few decades now without a plan of action. There is little or actually none in terms of cooperation between municipal authorities and citizens. In effect, citizens do not have the ability to contribute their ideas and their best knowledge and efforts towards what the municipality is doing.
But the problem with the young people that you mentioned is that they don't have a memory of Famagusta, do they?
The young people do not have a memory. They have had none of the joy, and they have only been living through the problems afterwards, and they're not really motivated, and I can understand that. And the responsibility on our generation, I was 6 at the time, and 48 now, is to deliver a key to these young people, and that should be the key to Famagusta. It should be the key to houses in Karinia, in Morpho, the surrounding villages. I think that each one of us has to go about solving his own Cyprus problem.
When you talk about houses in these different areas, are you basically suggesting that Greek Cypriots who have property in the north should lay claim to it and ask to move back there. If that's the case, what is actually stopping them? Because would the authorities in the north say, yeah, sure, go ahead?
The authorities in the north have been saying go ahead. People have been relocating back to the north in small numbers, taking advantage of personal relationships that they have developed and having given their own personal credentials as peace-loving people. A number of people have relocated back to the village of Agetrias, which is located on the Karpas Peninsula. Other people have been relocating back to Rizzo-Karpaso, even though the net figure is that of a decreasing population overall. And interestingly, Maronite villages have also seen their populations blooming. And that brings us to the point you made about Greek Cypriots. I think that one has to break down Greek Cypriots into various categories. A stereotype perception of nowadays could be that we're all enosis-hungry individuals. I was 6 at the time. I was not complicit. I do not believe in that, having studied our history. If at 10,000 years before Christ there was nothing here but animals, essentially that makes every single one of us here either an immigrant, a refugee, or an invader. And we're all citizens of Cyprus, and this is how a number of people see their presence on the island today.
All right, but if you talk about not just Famagusta, a lot of the Greek Cypriot-owned properties in the north have got people in them, either Turkish settlers or Turkish Cypriots who were displaced from the south back in 1974-75. So that's a problem. It's not a problem, I think, though, that you face in Famagusta, because the area you're talking about resettling there is empty.
Yes, it is empty. The problem that we will face there is the Turkish army, which is known to be a very hard negotiator in the process. Going back to the Maronite success story, if you wish, the Catholic Maronites have convinced through action and difference of religion that they were not part of the Orthodox Muslim struggle on the island. As such, if you go to the village of Kormakidis, you will see the churches being fixed, being clean, operational, with street names in Greek, with people living there, and with other Maronite villages also coming up with the support of the Turkish army into being again, with permits being given for people to relocate, albeit at small numbers. Initially, the direction is clear. So the concept is that peace-loving Cypriots who have no wish to be involved in continuing these past policies that in part brought us to where we are today, can and should separate themselves clearly. And approaching Famagusta, what you have is crossing through the new roadblock that will be opened will be Cado de Rinya. Cado de Rinya has 200 houses, and it can be a beautiful bicommunal village. It's in no man's land. It's the equivalent of the Lidra Palace area that we have over here, and it's a natural spawning ground for those who would like to, let's say, meet in the middle. Moving on, as soon as you cross the border, going towards Famagusta, you are on the Rinia Road. The right-hand side of the Rinia Road is basically the ghost city. There is a fence right there, poorly kept. You could even walk over it, and a number of people have done it. What the suggestion is that we do is that we place a second fence behind the first row of houses. The first row of houses is a series of properties that, due to the urban sprawl, date from the 17 or 1800s at Varosha, and they go up to 1974 when you reach the Rinia. So this historical cross-section of one building depth along the Kelia Road can be useful for scientists who can evaluate the structures, the typologies, and to help arrive at cost estimates that will be needed for the purposes of resettlement of Famagusta.
But who owns those houses?
These are kept by the Turkish military. Right now they're under their custody. They're owned by a large number of individuals that can be approached through Facebook or through the land registry by making searches, by asking them if they would like to participate.
And if they don't want to move back, maybe they would rent to somebody who does.
Yes, and having no schools there would make the first 5 years or whatever years until schools are in place, it would not attract all sorts of people. Like the Maronite villages initially will attract goat herders and people who choose to live off the land. In moving further from the Rinia, or those Derinians, on your right-hand side you have a church, a Yazoni. It's located in a sort of a cul-de-sac area, Rosie. The area is ideal. If we were to take one street or two streets, the electricity is right there. You don't need a master plan for Famagusta. You don't need a Famagusta Eco City for that. We have no plan in any case. A plan has never been made. We have been asked by the World Bank on what are our ideas on raising funds, and the clear answer is that we have no plan, and therefore we're entitled to no money. So it's an additional obstacle for the Famagusta people, and this can be solved by these small-scale one road or two road projects that will allow people to return back home.
You'll have to get electricity, you'll have to get water, and the access presumably would be, as you said, through the Rinia area.
The Rinia Road. Yeah, the Rinia Road. The Rinia Road is such that as you're going towards Famagusta, on the left-hand side of the street, you have houses in which Turkish Cypriot people live, and on the right-hand side you have vacant properties. So electricity, water, road access is already there. This makes it very attractive and very easy to do, and I do not think that Turkish national defense will be threatened where a new fence be made 30 meters down.
Now, you've put this up on your Facebook feed, and you've had a lot of interesting reactions. How many people, if you get this off the ground, would you need to implement the first stage of moving back?
Well,
and I should add, will the people be living there permanently or renovating houses and maybe just using them at the weekend?
I would say that people will be using them for the most part over weekends. Some people will move there and live there. During the mayor campaign, I ran a survey of, I've asked 400 people using professional means as to their intentions regarding relocating under Turkish Cypriot administration. The reason that I have done that was because the policy of the last governments or the end result of the collective efforts of our society have led us to a dead end, and the deeply humanitarian problem of going back to one's home is still unaddressed. 30% of people are ready to move back under Turkish Cypriot administration.
Now that is very important, isn't it? Because the whole sort of series of negotiations has been talking very much about which areas would come under Greek Cypriot administration, which would remain under Turkish Cypriot administration. And the message that we tend to be given in the media here and by the politicians is that most Greek Cypriots wouldn't want to live under Turkish Cypriot administration, and that a lot of Turkish Cypriots wouldn't want to live in areas that are under Greek Cypriot administration.
That is true, though. My observations regarding negotiations is that negotiations have been happening on an all-or-nothing basis. Guys, don't worry. Unless we agree to everything, we will have agreed to nothing. So 50 years down the line, this leaves us with nothing. And as far as mass media in Cyprus, the fact and the plain truth, unless one wants to hide behind his finger, so to speak, is that media is not friendly towards living together for the most, with notable and smaller exceptions. There is a 40% of people who would not wish to go back explicitly, and a percentage of these people would be upset where other people were to return. This percentage of population may not realize that the action of going back to one's home under dire conditions will be judged in time when the history is written by people not partial to the events, and it will say that these people managed to keep a foothold on their land during these adversities. And Cyprus does not have a fantastic record in human rights observation. I don't think that the human rights and the deeply humanitarian aspects would really go a long way in persuading people here to look at the refugees who have already suffered, starting from not only the 60s and 70s events. In 1976 up until 1981, refugees were deliberately spread at a number of settlements had a ratio of approximately 1 Famagusta person to 10 refugees. Taking Larnaca as an example, you have 8,700 Famagusta refugees. There are 3 settlements there that are bigger than 10,000 people, so all of the Famagusta people could have been in either one of the 3. But you will find Famagusta people in 15 settlements, and you will find them spread one in each road, and this has been done so that our society would basically be absorbed in the south. You will not find a highway sign from Larnaca to Ayanapa saying Famagusta, leading you to the roadblock of Strovilia. And it's things like this, the total absence of plan, the total absence of communication. We have the UN resolutions that are applicable, which we will take full advantage of. Resolution 550 is a resolution that came about in 1984 when the Turkish army was claiming that it would open up Famagusta. 550 basically says, do not inhabitate Famagusta and give it to the United Nations for their administration. After 8 years with the Turks having done nothing, and in 1992, the international community came with a second resolution, which is less known. This is Resolution 789. And this is a resolution that the municipal authorities of today, end of the last years, have consciously been choosing to neglect. This resolution rightly believes that the Turkish army is not cooperating, so it is asking the two communities to engage into joint action between themselves to come up with joint plans for the resettlement and for progressing their lives, social studies that will be needed, financial studies and technical studies alike. Interestingly, Resolution 789 also offers grants, donations, and large amounts of money, and our local excuse is that, well, we don't have the money to do all of these projects. In reality, all we've had to do is ask for them, and we have never asked for them.
Okay, so you're looking for people to get in touch with you if they're interested. If you get, let's say, 40 or 50 people, is that the number you want? Or how many people do you want?
Well, in the municipal elections, I have had more than 1,600 people vote for me. And these were people that have been listening to pretty much the same things. My intention is to work for our return, with or without a solution to the Cyprus problem.
Yes, but how many people do you need to sign up to be some of the people who will move into these houses?
The more people that will sign up, the better it will be. In practical terms, though, we will have to identify the areas that will be earmarked to be proposed, as in these 1 or 2 streets. Then we will have to find out these residents, and we will have to approach them one by one and describe this to them. A number of people are not using Facebook, a number of people are sick and tired and fed up, and a number of people are no longer with us, and I do not wish to see another one person leaving.
So how long is this going to take you?
We are working full speed, and we should have an organization and a plan of action ready within the next 30 days. And from there on, we will begin signing up people that believe in our manifesto, which is a manifesto of peace. And we will then proceed to discuss with the Turkish Cypriot these plans, form a bicommunal body after having tidied up our own part of the story. And we intend to work closely. I would say that we need 50 Greek-speaking Cypriots and an equivalent number of Turkish-speaking Cypriots.
And we should add that the Technical Committee on Cultural Heritage has already, in a sense, put a foot in the door with the restoration it's been doing in Famagusta, the Othello's Tower, and another plan coming up shortly. So there is a lot of communication between the Turkish Cypriots in the area and the Greek Cypriots like you who want to go back.
Yes, and it has to be observed that the said technical committee has done admirably without being the recipient of any funds at all. And the expenses that are incurred, traveling expenses, office expenses, the most basic of expenses are paid by the pockets of those who are in this committee. That is
commitment.
Commitment on their behalf and castigation of those that manage the money on the other end.
So where can people get in touch if they want to find out more?
If they would like to find out more, right now they can contact me on my Facebook page, Andreas C. Lordos. I will be very happy to compile a list, and from there on, if they would be interested in seeing projects relating to Famagusta, they can go to andreaslordos.com, which is a page used for the municipal elections, but which is being modified. What that does is that it will offer a vision of the future of Famagusta. Citizen views as to what is needed for tomorrow's Famagusta are placed there in very short paragraphs, and a short description of what it's supposed to do, and right next to it a voting button. So not only citizens can put their ideas forward, but they can be shared. And
other people can say whether they think that's a good idea.
Yes, or not. And we've learned a lot in the process. But for the most part, the ideas were good. And again, what has to be said is that during the elections, there was no real interest on behalf of any political party, with the exception of the Green Party, which showed up in the presentations. All of the other major parties, including DC, AGEL, who are theoretically pro-peace, have not come to see these ideas. And after the elections, we have not been contacted by the municipality. So ostensibly what 1,600 people, most of them younger, believe in is not of any real consequence.
So you need to look for andreaslordos.com or look for Andreas C. Lordos on Facebook. Get in touch if you'd like to share your ideas on the future of Famagusta. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.